Welcome to the Barrawan Branch Model Railway. In this video I outline the methods I used for modeling the sealed and unsealed roads on the diorama. I began by filing and sanding the road bases into the layer of sculpted. This stretch of unsealed road illustrates some of the features I want to model on the diorama. The drainage ditch along the high side of the road runs the full length of the bank. The road gets boggy in this section, so blue metal has been rolled over it. Note the crown of blue metal in the center compared to the nearly bare lines from car tires. 2 mm styrene strip was pinned along each side of the unsealed road base. This is the line of the drainage ditches. The road widens slightly after the bridge. The strip of styrene prevents dirt and glue overflowing the edge. Fine real dirt was spread along the outside of the styrene strips and aligned with the scenic base. The dirt was tamped down along the slope of the ground. I spread a blend of fine dirt and tile grout along the roadway. Then worked up to the styrene edging. I get a better finish doing it this way than attempting to spread the material in a single pass. A piece of styrene was used to smooth the surface of the grout mix before fixing it with water and scenic cement. Everything was sprayed with isopropanol before misting on sufficient water to thoroughly wet the grout and dirt. Finally, it was soaked with scenic cement and allowed to dry overnight. The styrene strips were then removed and I began working the road surface and ditches. I began by making the wear lines made by traffic either side of a narrow center strip. First with coarse sandpaper. Then with files. Next, I rounded the ditch edges with a file. I also made the road edges less uniform. Raw umber was run along the ditches to cover the exposed plaster. Fine dirt was then added along the margins of the road and ditches. Once that had dried, I added more fine dirt to round out the ditches and blend them into the road and bank margins. I used a soft brush to feather the dirt into position. I avoid using full-strength paint products for scenic work as their finish is too uniform. Also, they tend not to accept washes and weathering materials as well as stains of thin paint do. However, for the sealed road, I used a spatula to spread a thin coat of Tamiya pavement texture paint over the sanded sculpted, more as a filler than as a finish. While it produced a nice finish for a modern bitumen pavement, it lacked the texture of the rough mix used in the 1960s. Rough mix was produced by first spreading tar on the road surface, then rolling blue metal into it. The road is slightly over 1 lane wide, so I added a center line. I did this before adding the rough mix texture. First I painted an over-wide line. A length of masking tape near the road center was used as a guide. I ran thinned white acrylic along the edge of the tape. Thinning the paint reduces its opacity, thus making it look weathered and worn. The white line was then given a coat of flat clear. I cut a strip of masking tape 1.1 mm wide and laid it along the white line. I cut segments out of the tape at the intersection of the unsealed road. I then sprayed a coat of matte clear along the tape before spraying dark gray acrylic over the road. The clear coat prevented the dark gray from wicking under the tape. To model the rough mix, I first covered the road center line with a strip of 2 mm masking tape. I then brushed scenic cement onto one side of the road surface using a 40mm brush. I used superfine cinders for the rough mix texture. I obtained these by sifting fine cinders through a tea strainer prior to beginning work. I sprinkled the superfine cinders over the glue using a strainer. The aim of the first pass was to provide some tooth for future passes. Tapping the strainer accelerated the distribution of cinders. I applied more cinders than necessary to ensure that sufficient adhered to the glue. Once the glue had dried, I gently shook the loose cinders onto a sheet of paper, ready for reuse. I then repeated the procedure on the other side of the center line. I feathered fine dirt along the road margin and in the ditches as before. I also feathered some cinders onto the unsealed road as occurs where traffic leaves a sealed road. I brushed 3 shades of weathering powder into the unsealed road margins. The powder colors are like the yellow ochre, burnt sienna and raw umber watercolors that are used for the bare ground. I use a soft brush initially to spread the powder. Then I use a coarse bristled brush to work the powder into the surface. This helps blend the color. Some of the powder was worked onto the sealed road where vehicles coming off the unsealed road would drag mud and dirt. More work will be done after the ground cover has been added. The sealed road is too dark and new looking, so it will be weathered down. I began by brushing off white powder along each lane to represent traffic wear and tear. This will require several passes to get the look I'm after. Other weathering and details will be addressed later. The real road was curbed and channeled to the last house at the base of Red Hill. Its yard and fence will be modeled, so I made a length of roadside guttering and drain from styrene angle. I also fabricated a grate over the drain. Until next time, happy modeling.